Before we get to the reporters and start this segment, I want to give a special thanks to our sponsors, without whom we could not have an event like this. Our sponsors are Atlantic City Electric, KPMG, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and New Jersey American Water. And so to get to the program, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, who will introduce our panelists. And our moderator is Tom Bergeron, owner and editor of ROI New Jersey. Tom.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. Just to give a rundown to the people out there, we have a number of top journalists around the state, and we have a number of top topics. If anybody wants to jump in and add a question to the Zoom group chat, we're happy to take questions from there. If not, I got a list of about 20 or so things that we can go through here, so there'll be plenty to talk about. I'm going to start with a couple introductions. I'm Tom Bergeron. I'm the owner editor of ROI-NJ, a publication we started 3 or 4 years ago. I've been in New Jersey for a couple of decades. In a previous lifetime, as people would say, I was once a sports editor of the Star Ledger and worked for Yahoo and moved around. In our heart, ROI-NJ is a B2B business journal, and we like to think that we are writing for the thought leaders and decision makers in the state. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give a brief introduction like that. Let's start with Rhonda from NJ, Spotlight News.
Thanks, Tom, and I'm really excited to be here. We're going to have a great conversation. So my name is Rhonda Schaffler. I'm the business correspondent at NJ Spotlight News. I do a nightly business update on our show, and I also anchor our weekend digital business show, which is NJ Business Beat. I've lived in New Jersey most of my life. Prior to working at NJ Spotlight, I worked covering business news in New York at some national outlets, and I got my start here in New Jersey in radio.
There you go. Stacie.
How are you? I'm Stacie Sherman. I'm with Bloomberg News. I've been with Bloomberg for 24 years. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I got my start in the 90s in the New Jersey State House. I was working for the Asbury Park Press and then the Home News, and I've been with Bloomberg ever since. I've been a reporter, an editor. I was a New Jersey bureau chief for many years, just until recently. I just got a promotion. I am deputy managing editor for the U.S. bureaus, so I oversee our bureaus across the country and help them assign and edit stories.
Awesome. Daniel, jump in.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I'm the State House and Economic Development reporter with Njbiz. You'll see me, I guess, in your inbox. We do a daily newsletter in the morning and the afternoon. You'll see me in Trenton, not as much these days because of the current public health crisis. I guess I'm the baby of this whole cast of characters. I started a few years ago, and I'm graduated Rutgers in 2015, but I'm also a lifelong New Jersey resident. Grew up in Bergen County since the 90s, so I'm pretty happy to be excited to be here.
Kurt?
Tom, good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Kurt Siegelin. I'm the evening news anchor at News 12 New Jersey. Next month marks 25 years at News 12 for me. I started as a sports anchor, a sports director there, moved full-time to news back in 2007, 2009, made the transition fully to a morning news anchor, and I've been on the evenings for the last 3 years now. News 12 New Jersey, for those of you who don't know, is a 24/7 full service news operation for the state of New Jersey, and we've been on the air since 1996.
Awesome. All right, let's get right to it. Kurt, let's stay with you. Let's talk about the vaccination process, which is on everybody's mind. Murphy talks about it every day. There's a lot that he can do. There's a lot that he can't do. Give us an idea of what you're hearing from the business community and the political community on how the state is doing on vaccines.
Well, the state, if you compare it to other states, we're probably in the middle of the pack in terms of getting doses out. As of this morning, I was looking on the state portal, 627,000 vaccines have been given in New Jersey, and New Jersey has received 1.1 million. That's according to the CDC. So there's about 465,000 people or so who have received a first dose and are awaiting a second dose. And part of the reason New Jersey is holding onto the stockpile is that stockpile will be there for those 465,000 to get that second dose. In some regards, the governor is hamstrung by a couple of things. One, federal supply. Everybody's been talking about the feds holding on and not releasing enough dose. The second part, and I think this is more pertinent to the story in New Jersey, is the long-term care. New Jersey did opt in for the Walgreens and CVS federal partnership there. So the governor is sort of working on the pharmacy's timeline to get those vaccines out to the people who are generally most impacted by coronavirus. So in some regard, there's only so much the governor can do about getting people, 70 and older vaccinated.
Rhonda, let me jump over to you. When you talk with the business community and you hear from the leaders, there's a lot of issues on the vaccine process, what the order is going to be, who's going to go first, and how that's going to impact the business community. I think a lot of people are wishing that teachers would move higher to the line, maybe get more kids back in school, which not only is great for our kids, but in theory would help employees be able to more concentrate on their work at hand. Talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the rollout and any contents or criticisms.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, everyone wants to go first, right? Every business wants to get their employees vaccinated, and we know there's an order that's being followed. I think what a lot of companies are wrestling with is, so what does this actually mean? I was just speaking with a nonprofit actually, and they were saying, can we mandate people to get a vaccine to go back? And while there's been some guidance on that from the EEOC, it's a little bit ambiguous, and there's a lot that has to be clarified. So listen, businesses, nonprofits, they're trying to figure out how can you make this work for them. Certainly it is out of everyone's control unless you're in the healthcare field and you can get those vaccinations right away. And we also know not everyone wants to get vaccinated. So what does that mean if your employee doesn't want to get vaccinated and you have to provide a reasonable work alternative for them? So there's so much that's not clear right now from the business perspective. It's very, very difficult. And we just kind of have to work through this. I mean, the liability issue is going to be a big issue as well when people get back. So I think there is a lot of frustration out there. And in a way, everyone's kind of waiting to see who does what first, because you don't want to have to go out and make those decisions and be wrong and be uncomfortable. So I feel for every business owner, I feel for every nonprofit, because as this plays out, there's going to be a lot of really hard decisions with not as much guidance perhaps as some people would like.
Stacie, let me turn to you and talk a little bit about what the state can do for the business community. Once we get past the vaccine issue, which is first and foremost with everybody's mind, there's the second round of the PPP loans that are coming up. Rhonda just mentioned the liability protections. There's talking about more grants and more low interest loans that are coming. What do businesses need to be able to move ahead? I think everybody is sort of, like Rhonda just said, it's a hurry up and wait situation. When you talk with the community, what are they looking for? What are they hoping for?
They need the economy to be open. I think that's the number one issue. They need people out there buying and going out to restaurants. I don't know how businesses can operate right now. I know a lot of businesses that have shut because, number one, we need people out there, and how to do that. I think schools are a big part of that. As a working mom, I'll tell you, schools are super important. You have to get, in order to get people back into the office, the kids have to be in school. So those are important. Once, I think the governors, the politicians seem to be waiting for critical mass with the vaccinations to really open the doors. Governor Murphy did say yesterday, he was on Bloomberg TV, and he said that he would consider starting to reopen soon if the numbers continue to improve. But we're talking a little by little by little. I think it's going to be months before the economy is back open. So we're going to have to see what happens. But as far as what businesses need, I think the number one thing is to be open, and then they're going to need help keeping their costs low because they have, they're barely making it. So, I'm talking about maybe tax cuts or tax credits, things like that, to help businesses manage, once they're, help them reopen.
Daniel, when you talk to people in the legislature and when you talk to the business owners, talk about the reopening process. Is there any hope that it might pick up a little bit? I mean, we're coming up on a year now of essentially a state shutdown in some way. It is an election year, which we'll get to in a little bit more. Are you getting a sense that the business community is sensing that this might happen a little bit sooner than later?
Well, initially, when the vaccine announcements first came out in November, the governor was saying April or May. This was before the delays that we are now seeing really start to come about. I think the expectation is that the combination of vaccines and approaching herd immunity with warmer weather, which allows people to stay outdoors, would mean that as the weather gets warmer, we're going to gradually lift restrictions. And as the governor has put it, it's going to be like a dimmer. So we're at 25% indoor dining, we might go to 35%, 45%. And the hope is that by the time winter comes around next year, that enough of this will be under control. That's a matter of months, almost a year, which is probably not the most reassuring thing to hear, but that's sort of where the cards seem to be falling at the moment.
All right, this is going to be my first attempt at comedy so far, so hopefully people out there will be laughing at this, because we all know that data determines dates. Everything that the governor has done and the administration has been 100% data driven. I think the frustration when I talk to the business community is they have no idea what data he's looking at, or if they tell what data they're looking at, how he's extrapolating it to come up with the answers that he's getting. Kurt, let me go to you. You've been someone in News 12 has talked about the numbers that have come out that the governor's used, and Daniel just said 25% and 35%, and we have cases that we're getting, and we have rate of transmission. We have all of these issues. Are you getting a sense that while his approval numbers are generally still high, the business community is getting frustrated because they're not seeing a roadmap to where he's trying to get to?
Yeah, and listen, in fairness to the governor, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly, to put a date. I mean, I understand the frustration of business owners. They want to know, hey, March 1st, this is going to happen. But the virus is really dictating that, and this rollout of the vaccine. So absolutely, I get business owners wanting specificity, but I also understand the governor's point. If he puts a date on it, well, what if cases suddenly go up? That date is no longer valid. So it's a difficult thing. But back to your point, Tom, about the data, and the data determines dates. I think one of the big problems this administration has had over the past 10, 11 months is the messaging of this data, and the full transparency. People see the numbers and they don't really understand what the underpinnings of those metrics are, and that has been a challenge I'm not saying it's an easy task that the Department of Health has had in putting out these numbers in digestible form every day. But I think looking back, there could have been maybe some different choices made and presentations made at these briefings that we see. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get it. It's just very difficult to say what date, oh, well, you can reopen now because the virus is tampered down and vaccines are out and herd immunity is reached. I don't know that date. I don't know that anyone knows that date.
Rhonda, let me go to you, because we're talking about openings, and in addition to getting the kids back in school, I think the next on everyone's list is getting a good bite to eat, right? We've all learned how to cook better than ever before and work the takeout better before, but the restaurant industry has really been clobbered by this. And we've had some stops and starts, and they're trying to make adjustments. And again, this is a tough situation. You're trying to weigh the health of the community, but for restaurants, if they can't have customers, man, they are not surviving. What are you hearing from the restaurant community on where they want to be and where we're at?
Right. I will say, as somebody who doesn't cook, I'm trying to support the restaurant industry almost every night with my endless takeout habit. Before I touch on restaurants, I just wanted to bring up one thing about reopening, and that is the bill in the legislature that proposes a county by county look at reopening, which I think is interesting as one way the state can potentially address reopening in portions in areas where caseloads are low. I just find it an interesting bill. Look, for these restaurants, I mean, God bless them, trying to have people eat outside in this weather. There are some attempting it, and it is a struggle because you still have the issue that some people are just not comfortable, even with the precautions in place, to go out and dine at limited capacity or with heaters under a porch. So they are trying everything possible. I know in a community where I live, they're just starting a very grassroots kind of fundraiser to have families pitch in $20 and get food from these restaurants, and then they were going to donate the food. So some of these community efforts, I think, are going to be important. Some of these restaurants, we know they're not making it. Some have closed. Some are trying everything possible to stay open. They have limited hours. Listen, going forward, they need grants. We know the EDA has carved out certain grants just for restaurants. There needs to be more money, whether it's state, federal. This is the only way they're going to really get through. And keep in mind, these restaurants are not able to keep people on the payroll either. And so that's a whole nother problem. It's very, very difficult. The faster they get more help, the better it's going to be, not just for them, but for their employees.
Let's talk about the grants. And listen, they're wonderful, and $10 is $10, and every get any penny that they can at this time of assistance is grateful, but it can't keep the economy afloat. And I heard from a lot of business owners when the governor talks about the tens of thousands of companies that have received grants, but the reality is most of them have been $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 tops, which has helped for maybe a month or part of a month or a little bit more than a month, depending on their size. Where can we go with the grants versus the revenue? How is that balancing? Daniel, let me go to you and hit you with that question. From what you're hearing, the idea of reopening to make revenue as opposed to getting grants, where does that stand with the business community?
I mean, I think the grants and the PPP loans is this basically paying people to either stay at home or just paying people to just stay afloat and businesses to not have to lay off employees. It can't work long term. It's basically you're keeping the economy in suspended animation, and business owners I talk to say, no, we need to have product. We need to keep restaurants open. We need people shopping and dining. This sort of suspended animation is not a long-term solution, and it's not going to keep the economy going. And it's going to be sort of where it is now, constricted, a lot of economic pain, and basically that.
So let's go to the fact that this is an election year that we've talked about. How do we think that's going to change things? And I'm going to bring everybody in on this question because I think this is going to be one of the overriding issues moving forward. Stacie, let's talk with you and talk about the idea of politicians need to act a little bit differently during the election year. What can the business community hope to see out of this?
Well, by the time campaign season really starts, I would say this summer, Governor Murphy really needs to have this economy open. I mean, he doesn't want to campaign for governor with the economy closed, with businesses angry, with kids home, with not in school. So he has a couple of months to do it, and I think that's a good sign for business. He will face pressure to get this done by campaign season.
Kurt, jump in here. What do you think of the campaign and the election is going to do for the economy overall?
Yeah, I completely agree with Stacie. I think the timeline is earlier than that, actually. I think I'd say by mid-late spring, the numbers are going to be to a point, both the case loads and the hospitalizations, plus the vaccination effort. I think there would be no reason not to open the economy by then. We are on the virus's schedule here, not an election season schedule. And I think those work hand in hand with the timing of the governor's re-election bid here. As Stacie was mentioning, this ramps up in the summertime. Well, summertime, I mean, if we just go by 2020, our caseloads were very low. Hospitalizations were practically non-existent. Plus you add in the vaccination factor now, this virus is going to be pretty much, it's not even going to be a story, I think, when we get to August. Vaccinations will be a story, but in terms of caseloads, I mean, you're going to see a dramatic increase or dramatic difference between now and just a month from now. So when you extrapolate out to July and August, I mean, there's no reason for the economy not to be open by then.
Rhonda, you agree with that?
You know, I love that optimism. I hope that is correct. I mean, it's certainly, you would think so based on what we're hearing about the vaccines. But I think when we come to campaign season, it'll be, have businesses recovered? Do they see their revenue? And a survey came out last year that many still see revenue challenges continuing through this year. So they will be thinking about that. Am I whole again? And look, if people haven't recovered their own employment situation, haven't found jobs, that is going to be part of the conversation. I think it's interesting too, because, you know, the Economic Recovery Act, the governor signed late last year, the tax incentive bill, I don't know that that's going to make a difference so quickly. So it's going to be hard to kind of campaign on economic growth. So it'll be interesting. I think you'll hear from Republicans that we pushed all along for accountability, and we supported regional reopening. So I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. I would love if we were talking less about the virus and the caseloads were really down by then.
Daniel, let's go to you on the incentive package that took 2 years to get from start to finish, and how that's going to impact the business community. You can address the issue of Governor Murphy was very anti-incentives, or incentives in a very specific way, and what kept true to that issue. And also the idea of, are these incentives going to new businesses coming in as opposed to existing businesses here? The reaction from the business community when the incentives were finally passed and all of the potential that could come here, how did that go over?
Well, a lot of business groups, a lot of businesses I've spoken to support it. There is some criticism that the direct grants, it's the Main Street program, I believe it's only 50 million, and there's argument that that needs to be higher. To go off Rhonda's point, this is something that's going to take the better part of the year to set up. When I spoke with Tim Sullivan, who heads the Economic Development Authority, which will oversee many of these incentives programs, he said that because of concerns about transparency, because of the very nature of these incentive programs, it's going to take some of them the better part of the entire year. This sort of this venture capital, joint financing, the Evergreen Fund, that could be until the end of the year. So we're not going to see the results of that until it's basically a decade-long process that this is going to take. So it's going to be somewhat of a hard sell for Governor Murphy to say, I passed this for an economic recovery, if businesses haven't regained their employment in October. If they're still suffering, they're not. It's going to seem rather esoteric and non-substantive if they still are struggling come election season.
Stacie, let me swing back to you. And there's been a lot of talk about businesses reopening. And one of the points that we hear about from both businesses and business consultants is when businesses, quote unquote, do reopen, right? We're all partially open at this point. The next generation of the workplace, not just for restaurants, but for offices, everything is going to be different as far as a willingness to work remotely, as far as a willingness to come to work, liability protections. Talk a little bit about the workplace in the future. And do you think enough businesses, from what you're hearing, are understanding that we're not going to go back to normal? If we can snap our fingers and everyone's vaccinated tomorrow, it's going to be a different world than pre-pandemic. And is the business community fully embrace that from what you've been hearing?
I think a lot of businesses have. I think this COVID period showed that a lot of work can be done at home. There were, for years, you know, you had to go to the office. You had to go to the office. My company included. I personally would rather be in the office, probably because I have kids at home. But it did show that when things first closed, I said, "There's no way that I could do my job from home." You know what? I'm here a year later, and I figured it out. And a lot of people did. So it did provide a lesson for business owners and employees that there are a lot of things that can be done at home, and it does save on costs for some employers as well to not have employees in the office. I mean, on the other hand, you know, people could be seen as more efficient once they're in the office around other people. So there's different viewpoints on that. I think for the most part, businesses have accepted it, but I know, like, in journalism, it's good to be in a newsroom around other people and talking, and that's part of our business. And I don't think that's going to go away, but there are certain functions that can be done at home. And I think that has forever changed the industry.
You know, let's talk about business as a whole in New Jersey. And it's always known, the first thing people say about New Jersey, it's an expensive place to do business. And we all get that. And we're talking about grants, and we're talking about loans, and we're talking about incentive packages. And we're talking about a lot of borrowing. I mean, the governor has made it very clear from the beginning that he would want more money from the Fed, as everybody does. But the state also has agreed to take on a lot of borrowing. Kurt, give us a sense from what you're hearing about, the governor has said we'll be treated kindly if we overshoot. Does the business community feel that way?
You know, it's a really great point. I mean, yeah, we are, mortgaging the future to deal with the present. There's no question about that. And what does that mean? But, we're doing that on a national level as well with the federal deficit moving forward. I was speaking with New Jersey Senator Cory Booker about this when one of the stimulus packages was approved. So what do we tell our kids? I mean, what are we putting on them, 15, 20, 30 years down the line? I think the same goes here for New Jersey, but, this is an unprecedented situation. So whatever we have to do to fix the now, we'll worry about the later. And I think that's been the approach, not just in the New Jersey level, but the federal level as well. So we just got to get through this, and let's worry about, down the road when we get down the road.
All right, let me bring in a couple of questions that we're getting from people who are coming in, which is great, and we appreciate that. Stacie, I'm going to go back to you. Somebody makes a mention of the governor's reopening commission, which was such a big deal when it was introduced, and I believe they have not released any type of report and will not. But a lot of those were a lot of big names, big national names, big company names, not enough small business is a complaint. From what you're seeing in the reporting that you guys are doing, is small business feel like they're getting the shake that they need and the interest that they need from the governor throughout all of this?
I don't know that the government, I know nationwide, small businesses don't feel like they're getting a fair advantage. Like with the PPP loans, it was like the PPP loans were awarded and you had all these corporations getting them. And it's like, how did they get them? This is aimed at small businesses. That was pretty shocking. I think the governor has recognized that small businesses are the backbone of the industry. I don't know about the commissions. I'm like, journalists like commissions and task force and things like that. It's like, just get it done. And I think people are I hate task force. I hate commissions. It's just like an extra step to get things done sometimes. Sorry if I offend anybody, but I just think people are just fed up with waiting, and small businesses, they're definitely looking for help. Small businesses are the ones that really need the help. So
and look,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Small businesses is a complicated area. And I've heard this off the record, not for attribution from a number of people. And the thought is, look, in a healthy economy, a number of small businesses, a percentage, are going to fail every year, are going to turn. That's the beauty of the small businesses. Any great entrepreneur will tell you, say, hey, look, I started 6 businesses before I hit it. So some people have said, look, if you can't save every small business because some of them were not set up to succeed anyways. That's a difficult balancing act. And a lot of this comes with a lot of the mom and pop restaurants that open and close. Rhonda, talk a little bit about that, on how much more the state can do or should do for small businesses from what you're hearing from the community.
Small businesses are frustrated. I spoke with one woman who said, I just want somebody in the administration to pick up the phone. So there's this sense that there's not the access there. There's a sense that there's not enough capital. Keep in mind, a lot of small businesses don't have a lot of operating capital historically. There's not all this money in the bank they can draw from. So it is true that small businesses fail, but I'll turn it around and think of how many small businesses get created. And some people will look at this as an opportunity. They've always wanted to try to open a business. They'll be able to get lower rents. Maybe they can work out of their homes. We know that the cost of capital will remain low. The Federal Reserve has told us that. So those are positives. What we're seeing though this time is so many more small businesses failing, and it's just not having enough money to tide them over until those customers get back. Absolutely, our focus should be there because the large companies have resources. And Stacie's point about the PPP loans, this new round, which is supposed to focus more on small businesses, we'll see if it actually makes a difference. I mean, the SBA did look at that program differently under Congress's directive because there was a recognition that businesses failed that perhaps didn't have to, but they just did not get in the line to get the money. So it's a big problem. We're not going to stop them all from failing. If we can save more, absolutely, that's what we should be trying to do.
And Kurt, I'll go back to you because one of the counterpoints is, look, you can give more money to small businesses and help them survive and help them meet payroll and help them meet rent, or you can let them go out of business and now you have to pay more money for unemployment. So you're spending the money either way. And the idea of PPP was we just want to keep people afloat and off some of the other government roles. Talk a little bit about that scenario.
Yeah, and Tom, also, shout out to, we've done some stories in the last couple of weeks of restaurants opening right now. I mean, these are business owners, entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs who just they don't care of the timing. They believe in their product, they believe in their service, and they've gone for it, and they've adjusted to this reality. So if we did a restaurant that opened, they don't have indoor seating. They just went all takeout, all delivery. And for them, it works because they believe in how good their food tastes. I mean, I think you see the adaptation of entrepreneurs and just that whole spirit here. So you just have to commend them because the courage it would take, given all the negative waves that are out there right now, to start a business and to start an operation at this time, big time salute.
All right, so let's switch from businesses back to people and social issues in the general public, and we're going to go back to the election coming up. Is there anyone in the Republican Party, announced candidates, unannounced candidates, that anyone thinks can really make a push against Governor Murphy, who has huge approval ratings? And if they do, will business issues be the crux of it, or will it be school opening, or will it be vaccines? What is the governor going to face in a re-election push from the other side? Let's start with Daniel. We'll go with you, and everybody else can jump in.
I think Jack Ciattarelli is so far the presumptive front runner. There doesn't seem to be anybody that has showed interest, or anybody who has showed interest doesn't seem to be as well financed and well connected. I think the economic reopening is going to be sort of that forefront issue that as we transition into that in the spring and into the summer. As has been mentioned here on the panel, Republicans are going to go in with that angle of attack that the governor didn't have to restrict businesses as much as he did. The governor could have been more transparent. Of course, some of that does come into sort of political pandering. I guess that's too strong of a term, to sort of this anti-shutdown sort of stance that Trump had taken. So some of it is sort of speaking to that, but the governor is going to be going up against sort of a very strained economy, business owners who have had to close down or have suffered a lot of pain.
Rhonda, do you think there'll be any traction there? I mean, we're not a state that has had the massive reopening type of rallies and protests that you've seen elsewhere. As people have explained to me, and I've heard on many occasions, is, we got hit with this first. So everyone sort of understood what the situation was early. Everybody kind of got in line. I think people would like to have seen some different things, but this is a tough challenge. Nobody's saying that this is an easy call. Is that a winning argument, do you think, in campaign season, that he should have done more?
Well, it's interesting. It's Jersey, so politics are always really fun to watch, and it's hard to guess where the narrative goes. But I do think what Daniel was speaking about, that will be part of the story. Listen, New Jersey's unemployment rate is higher than the national average. So the economic story right now is not a good one. And that is something that Republicans can capitalize, whether it's due to business closings, but those are just numbers, and our numbers don't look as good as some other states. Now, if you're a Murphy supporter, of course, you're going to say the governor got in front of this. He prevented things from being worse. He was aggressive. We might not have agreed with every decision. So you can really argue it either way. It's going to come down to how people feel. And by the way, all the other New Jersey issues are still there, such as it's a very expensive place to live. It's an expensive place to operate a business. So those kind of underlying themes that come up every political season are also still with us. I think it's actually going to be a fascinating campaign season.
Kurt, let me jump to you on one issue. On the one sense with the governor, with the school openings, I think most people have thought it was a good idea that he essentially left that in the hands of each individual school board. But as Rhonda and others have made the point, when you talk about an opening and now there's a bill out for a county by county opening, business owners have not gotten that ability to say, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, or my area is comfortable so we can reopen. That's been an interesting situation. How do you think that's going to come out in the coming months, sort of in campaign season?
It's a really interesting point. You know, listen, I really think this election is about COVID, period. And I mean, the various tentacles and how it's reached every single New Jerseyan, whether it be a business owner, whether it be somebody who had an elderly family member in a long-term care setting, whether or not somebody can get a vaccine, whether someone lost their job. I think it's, you know, you will individually vote for whoever you're going to vote for based on how COVID directly impacted you, based on what Governor Murphy had instituted over the course of the year. You're right. The one size fits all sort of narrative for businesses, but not for schools, and leaving that up to school superintendents. Listen, it's been kind of like, you know, we'll do this here, we'll do that there. I don't know that there's been a consensus in terms of how to approach it, but you're right. I mean, business, the business owner in, Union County or, Hudson County is a lot different than a business owner in Flemington, where, there's no one next door. I mean, in the per capita, the population density is not the same. So you're right, but it's like everybody's been painted with the same brush, but schools, it's been very specific. So I don't know. It's hard for me to know the motivations behind that, but, obviously schools are a very sensitive topic because it deals with our kids. That probably was the right move, to leave it up in the hands of the superintendents, although some may say that looks like you were just passing the buck and you didn't want the responsibility of taking that decision on yourself.
Awesome. All right, listen, somebody else is bringing up a point. My friend Walter here, I see on the chat box. Governor Murphy came in with a very progressive agenda, and it has sort of been, everything's been on halt with COVID, but yet you're still seeing a lot of the progressive moves. One of the first things he talked about in his State of the State was all of the other issues that he's doing to make this more of a progressive state. Is this something that in the time when we don't have any money and we're going into debt and everybody's going on COVID, can you still keep the progressive agenda push as opposed to a straighter business push, or the two not mutually exclusive? I'm all over the place with this question, so I'm going to go to my friend Stacie and say, you try to extrapolate what I just said there. Talk a little bit about the progressive agenda and whether that can continue to work or whether that's been put on hold.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving this complicated question. So I think if the governor wants to win a second term, the middle class and needs to be his focus. The middle class, I think, yes, the poorest people have suffered, but so have the middle class in a big way. And New Jersey's middle class is like a little bit, compared to the nation, it's like an upper middle class. It's like you focus on the rich people and you focus on the poor people, and the people in the middle sometimes get ignored. His progressive agenda has included, the minimum wage, which I know business owners were not very happy with, free college, which only affected the very low income people were able to get free college. So I think at this point in Murphy's term, the middle class are looking for more help. and it's something that he's going to need to focus on. His other progressive moves, it really depends on where Governor Murphy's eye is. Does he have national aspirations? I think for now he doesn't. So he, I think he might shift to the middle class. He's talked about it, but I think that is going to need to be his focus if he's going to win re-election.
Rhonda, let's get to the minimum wage and let's get to the middle class. The New Jersey was sort of ahead of the curve nationally on increasing the minimum wage. We've been moving along pretty quickly. I know when it first came out, there was a lot of pushback from the business community. How is that going from what you're hearing from the business community on this rise to $15 for minimum wage? Is it making sense? Is it hurting business? Is it helping the state? From what your reporting is telling you, what are you hearing about that?
Well, it's definitely one of these things where, business has accepted it. It is what it is. And now we're seeing efforts on the national level to move in that direction anyway, but it's another cost element. And what businesses are saying, okay, fine, minimum wage goes up, but then don't raise my taxes for X. Don't give me a mandate for this. Don't give me a new regulation for that. So it's kind of part of the whole holistic view of business expenses. And it's where the frustration really comes from, because businesses are saying, hey, okay, if I'm paying more for this, that's why actually that unemployment insurance bill was pretty important that the legislature passed, that basically made it less detrimental for businesses to replenish the unemployment trust fund. They don't have to do it all at once. It's another expense. So I think you have to look at the minimum wage increase in the context of all these other expenses. And that's where businesses push back against. It's hard to argue it's not going to change. But other things can potentially change on the expense side. And also for businesses, the millionaire's tax for certain businesses, that's also an issue. So I think it's kind of a cumulative impact that the businesses argue that it's just too much, especially a time like this. And that's kind of where they are. It's just throwing something else in there that's going to make it harder and harder to turn a profit.
Kurt, let me turn to you on that, because Rhonda mentioned a number of these. The CBT we can talk about. We can talk about the increase in minimum wage. You can talk about how the state, through sports gambling, was able to find an incredible revenue. We got an e-commerce deal out of nowhere from the Supreme Court. Boom, we can get more there. So there's been a lot of millionaires tax, different taxes that have come in to help raise the money. Now, you could say, look, all that gets thrown out the door because of the huge expenses of COVID. But the state has found a lot of different revenue answers here. And is the business community, like Rhonda saying enough is enough? We've given you all we've had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I completely backing up what Rhonda said as well. Listen, in terms of re-election and the governor's progressive agenda, if say the election and the re-election bid is a newspaper, the progressive agenda is page 8, pages 1 through 7 is COVID. That's how I see this. And all those other. Yes, he ran in when he back in 2017 on that agenda. That's what got him in office, fine. But we're just in a different reality now, where those things are still important to him. But it's how he's managing the crisis. That's ultimately going to be determined. That's the referendum. Whether or not people feel he's done a good job with that or a bad job with that, whether or not 1 year from now we're talking about him still being the governor.
All right, first of all, God bless you for mentioning newspapers for the that are unfamiliar. Cut my teeth in that industry, love it. So that was great to do. All right, so here's going to be a good segue. I'm going to do progressive politics and money. So I'm going to go to Daniel and I'm going to ask him to talk about cannabis. This is something that the governor thought was going to be a slam dunk layup from the minute he started campaigning. And here we are years later, we still don't have a cannabis rules and regulations set. The state has overwhelmingly passed it, but we're still in a holdup. This potentially could be big revenue for the state. It potentially could help solve some of the issues of social justice and social equity. There's a lot of boxes here that he'd want to check, but so far we can't get it off the ground. Daniel, how do you see this going, and are you surprised by what's happened?
Well, I guess I am. I don't know if I'm surprised or not. It's sort of, I feel like I've people who don't really follow New Jersey politics might see this and say, oh, it's just sort of politicians can't quite figure it out. But what seems to be happening now is there's disagreement in the legislature and the governor's office about offenses and how to go ahead with sort of for people under 21 or under 18. That seems to be the snafu that's holding it up. The governor has until February 8th to make a decision. Otherwise, it automatically becomes law, and he has the option to veto it or conditionally veto it, which is when he sends it back to the legislature. If he did that, that would really look bad for him politically, and I think that would be something of a sour national headline for him. But it's still up in the air just where it's going to go at this point, and if New York and Pennsylvania are going to outdo New Jersey, and they're going to suck in revenue because New Jersey took so long to get it together.
All right, Stacie, I'm gonna move to you. I'm gonna steer away from the pot question, and I'm gonna ask you to put on your national reporter hat, talking about the business community as a whole. Now, when we come out of the pandemic, the business world everywhere is going to be changed. People are going to have the ability, in theory, to live and work in different places than ever before. From what you see and what your reporting is from around the East Coast and around the country, Jersey set up as a strong business place to relocate to and to do business in going forward? Or is New Jersey going to suffer because people are going to say, hey, I can work from home. I'd rather be on the Outer Banks. I'm going to get the heck out of here. From what you're seeing from other states and what they're doing, how do you think the business community, the business future in the state looks?
This is such an important, complicated question. We're really looking at the issue of migration and what is happening with COVID, as far as like with New York City and people moving out of New York City into New Jersey suburbs or into Connecticut or Pennsylvania, and how that affects cities. I think in the future, COVID is going to impact people make them wonder if they really want to live so close together. That's one point. There's one thing to think about. The other thing is times are going to be tight, so they would want to live in a city so their commuting costs aren't so high. So there's a lot of factors that people are thinking through. I know there's moves we've talked about, people moving to Florida to lower cost states, and that's going to be an issue. It's really tough to say what people are doing right now. It's a national story for us, and we're looking at people moving from, California to Texas. There's people moving to Florida. There's also a big case going on with whether New Jerseyans who have been working from home should be paying taxes to their New York headquartered companies. That is a big issue for New Jersey, and that could determine a lot about where people live. It's a multi-state issue, so we'll see what happens with that. That's going to have a big implications as well.
Rhonda, let me take the same question to you as someone who has covered business in New Jersey and New York and the metropolitan area for, I'll say, a decade, maybe a little longer.
Kind of you.
So talk about the idea of New Jersey now. We're always trying to say that we're an attractive place to do business. Do you think we are right now at this point? Do you think that we've put ourselves in a position moving forward to continue to be?
Well, I would echo everything Stacie said. I mean, there's a lot going on here that is beyond New Jersey. I'd add to her list, people also have realized the importance of living close to their family. So if their family is not in New Jersey and mom is in Florida, that also might make sense for some people. But if you look at what New Jersey has done with the warehouse economy and our transportation hubs, I mean, from that perspective, we really have it all right here. And I also think, and I've talked to a lot of people who have businesses in New Jersey who have always lived in New Jersey and who love New Jersey. I mean, we've got a lot of great things in this state. Listen, you can be in the Outer Banks, but you can't see a Broadway show over the weekend, and we will do that again. So I think, there are very devoted people in New Jersey businesses that want to stay in the state, see advantages to stay in the state. It's the cost issue they'll come back to. But I do think we've had this like stealth growth in our warehousing industry. There's more and more of that. We have our transportation hubs, and I think that will be supportive, and of course the population. There are plenty of consumers here to buy your goods and services. So that's the tug of war. Those are the positives. The negatives are the costs. What will win out? I mean, I think it's going to play out as part of a national story that we'll yet to see.
Kurt, let me have you jump in here as someone, as you said, approaching 25 years of covering this state. Where do you see where we are now, and how has that moved over the years if you've been around?
You know, listen, the outflows in terms of the moves, New Jersey is the #1 outflow state in the country. And it's been like that for, I don't know, 7 or 8 of the past 10 years. People are leaving, you're right. But, so it really speaks to the great issue of what is the American economy going to look like in 10 years? Are we going to be a Zoom economy? Has this changed things forever going forward? I mean, if you had the option, I mean, you live in New Jersey because that's where your business is. But if you had the option of living, in Idaho, and seeing, beautiful pastoral scenes every morning, and you could just still do your work and just, commute like this every morning, would you opt to do that with the cost of living there? I can't predict what's going to happen in America, but I think that's a huge, we are at a transitional moment because of what's happened with COVID. And I think businesses, another part of this that we really touched on, commercial real estate. What's that market going to look like a year from now? Our company's going to decide, hey, we don't need all this space. We don't need to have all these cubicles because people can work from home. There's a lot of calculations into this formula, and it's hard to see, but I can tell you things will not be like they were a year ago.
The outmigration is an interesting domino effect. I think you'll see fewer people perhaps working in a New York City or Philadelphia. So more of them will come back to New Jersey, but at the same time, more people in New Jersey are going to say, hey, I can go to Pennsylvania, I can go to North Carolina, I can go to Cedar City, Utah, if you want to, and work from there. So I will say this to my media friends, the one thing that I love to do is every year run a story on the United Van Lines or Atlas Van Lines outmigration story, because as soon as I do it, even when you make a joke about it, your inbox is immediately flooded with the most passionate people on this issue. This is a huge one. All right, I got 9:58 on my laptop here. This has been great. We like to respect people's times. We're supposed to close at 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around. We like to call this the lightning round. I can be Ted Baxter. This is the old game show. So I'm going to ask each of you to just give one thought on the future of business in New Jersey. Pretty vague, pretty broad base right there. Daniel, let's go to you. Give me 30 seconds or less, something that you want the viewers to take away.
Well, I think that the economy will eventually recover, which I guess is sort of obviously, but like everyone else said, it's going to look fundamentally different, whether it's sort of a hybrid work from home, come into the office every once in a while kind of scenario. I think there will be more of a focus on sort of the main street local business. If people are spending more time at home telecommuting, that there's going to be sort of a connection with the local community, especially with all the pent up demand for going out and being able to socialize. So I think it's going to be, I guess, something of a roaring 20s once we get COVID under control. And it's gonna, I did see a joke, or I apologize if I'm taking 30 seconds, where no wonder people in the 20s wanted to dress up just to go to the grocery store because we couldn't before. So.
All right, there we go. Stacie, I kick it to you. What do you think?
I think that once the economy is open, people are going to flock again to stores and to restaurants. I know I am losing my mind at home. I'm ready to get out. I'm ready to go to, I hate shopping, on Amazon. People are just ready to get out. And I think the recovery is going to be quick once it's open.
Rhonda, thoughts?
Economy is going to bounce back. It's going to be strong. Businesses will be entrepreneurial and inventive. The economy will be just fine, but it'll take the jobs longer to come back, and we'll continue to see disruption in the workforce for a while.
Kurt, I give you almost the final word.
I'd say, Tom, second half of this year, the party is on. I think there's not going to be a COVID reason in the second half of this year not to reopen, not for people to go out. My one concern is people's own hesitancy in going out. You know, I saw yesterday, and I keep this brief, the TSA yesterday, 460,000 people through the nation's airports yesterday. It's the first time under 500,000 since July. People are not flying right now. This is January. People would want to be going to those warm weather places right now. I think it's not stated enough, the hesitancy that individuals will feel about going to a restaurant, about going to the sports stadium to watch a game. It may all be open, but are people going to be concerned? And let's wait and see, how long does that take to overcome?
Awesome. Listen, I can't thank the four of you enough. These have been some great insights. I think this has been a good conversation. Thanks to the folks that have been kicking things in on the group chat. I've tried to subtly and not so subtly pick up on some of your comments and weave them in there. And the way these things always end is me kicking it back to Tom Bracken at the chamber. Tom, this was glad we could do it. I will give you, in fact, the final word.
Thank you, Tom. And as usual, Tom, fantastic job. Let me weigh in on the last question too. I'm cautiously optimistic near term about our economy in New Jersey. And the further out we go, the more optimistic I'm getting. There's a lot of stuff going on that bodes well for the future of New Jersey, and we will get there. Let me thank Daniel, Stacie, Rhonda, and Kurt, not only for what you've done today, which is phenomenal, but you know, every day a person like me needs a foundation of information to do their job properly. And for me, ROI, Njbiz, New Jersey Spotlight News, News 12, and Bloomberg, they are go-to organizations for me every single day. You provide me great content, and I just thank you and just encourage you to keep that up every day because you're benefiting a lot of people. Let me also thank our sponsors today. Again, Atlantic City Electric, KPMG, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey American Water. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. We have two events coming up near term that you might want to tune into. One is on February the 3rd at 9 o'clock. Rob Angelo, our Commissioner of Labor and Workforce Development. And then on the 24th of February, we have a member networking breakfast at 9 o'clock, which you can find on our website. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to the 5 participants today. Phenomenal job. And again, to our sponsors and everybody who's tuned in today. Have a great day.